Hi guys, welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Reads. Today we are doing my top 5 reads of 2020. I did earlier this week, I did a 10 great reads, but these are the top 5 that stood out above everything else that I read this year. Realistically, this list was super easy to put together. I honestly didn't even need to go back through the list of everything I'd read this year. These 5 books just kind of stand in the top of my mind on their own. I did go back through and double check that I hadn't forgotten anything, but these 5 just, they just stand out from the others as 5 really good reads this year. So let's talk about them. I am going to go in order, although they're all great, so it's a little hard to put them in order, but we're going to try, starting with number 5 and working our way up. So at number 5, we have The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This was my first Ruta Sepetys. I have since read some of her other books, but this was the first one I ever picked up. This is historical fiction. It is set in the 50s in Spain. So after World War II and after their civil war, and Spain is currently under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. This is a time period in an area I didn't really know much about. These were stories I had never heard. And so that in itself was really interesting, just the setting of the story. We follow 2 main characters. We follow several characters, but there's 2 main characters that we follow. Daniel, who is a young, he's 19 or 20, I think. He is the son of an oil baron who is visiting. So he's American, he's very wealthy, but he himself doesn't want to go into oil. He wants to be a photographer. He meets this girl, Anna, who is a Spanish girl. She is a maid at the hotel they're staying at. And they develop a really sweet friendship. I really appreciate how their friendship is written in this book. That's one thing that really stands out to me. And through their friendship, Anna starts to show Daniel some of kind of the underside of what's happening in Spain at the time. So you get this this contrast kind of the side of Spain that's being presented to the public and to foreigners as, look at this beautiful country, look at what we've done, everything's great. And they're inviting all these, wealthy people in to come see. And then you have kind of the underside of the reality of what is actually happening in Spain and what is happening to the Spanish people and what's being done and what life is like for them. And I loved it. I loved the contrast of those things. I loved the development of the relationships between the characters, and just the own individual character growth as well. I was just really, really impressed by this book. I was actually pretty surprised. Part of me didn't think I was going to like it, but it's really stood out to me. It's one I want to pick up again soon and reread. All right, at the number 4 spot, this is a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but we're going to talk about Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that 2020 was definitely the year of Sanderson for me. I think I read 12 Sanderson books this year. I read most of the Cosmere as well as some other things. Elantris is a standalone book within the Cosmere. It is Sanderson's first published work, and it's generally not as well received as his later things. It's a debut novel. It has its flaws. Sanderson himself has said that it's not great. I disagree. I mean, I can't really disagree with Sanderson, I guess, but I think this book is very underrated. This is probably in my top 3 favorite Sandersons of all time that I've read. I just think it's really well done. I think the characters are so interesting. We follow a woman named Serene, as well as some other characters, but I just love the way he writes his characters in this, and the whole idea of Elantris. I'm going to read you the prologue because I can't really describe it to you very well, I don't think, what this book is about. But the prologue had me hooked. It's about half a page. So let me just read through this for you. Elantris was beautiful once. It was called the City of the Gods, a place of power, radiance, and magic. Visitors say that the very stones glowed with an inner light, and that the city contained wondrous arcane marvels. At night, Elantris shone like a silvery fire, visible even from a great distance. Yet, as magnificent as Elantris was, its inhabitants were more so. Their hair brilliant white, their skin an almost metallic silver. The Elantrians shone like the city itself, Legends claim that they were immortal, or at least nearly so. Their bodies healed quickly, and they were blessed with great strength, insight, and speed. They could perform magics with a bare wave of the hand. Men visited Elantris from all across Opalon to receive Elantrian healings, food, or wisdom. They were divinities, and anyone could become one. The Shroud, it was called. The transformation, it struck randomly, usually at night, during the mysterious hours when life slowed to rest. The Shroud could take beggar, craftsman, nobleman, or warrior. When it came, the fortunate person's life ended and began anew. He would discard his old, mundane existence and move to Elantris. Elantris, where he could live in bliss, rule and wisdom, and be worshipped for eternity. Eternity ended 10 years ago. And that's how Elantris starts. And if you don't think that's a stunning debut for an author, then I don't know what you're reading, but please tell me. Again, I just think this book is really underrated. I think the whole idea of Elantris and the people there and what's happened is just really fascinating. And I think this book is significantly better than Warbreaker, which is the other standalone in the Cosmere. Again, this is an unpopular opinion. Most people will argue me on that, and that's fine. You can have your own opinion. But I would not skip over Elantris. All right, moving up to number 3. Let's talk about more Sanderson. Who's surprised? Not me. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Stormlight Archive. This is a little bit of a cheat because I didn't pick just one. I have read the first 3, so The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Oathbringer, which I didn't grab. But these 2 are my favorite. I'm not sure which of these 2 is my favorite, but yes, just the series as a whole is fantastic. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because everyone's been talking about the Stormlight Archive this year. This is epic fantasy. We follow several main characters whose stories start pretty separately in The Way of Kings and then begin to intertwine in Words of Radiance and further. And I really recommend you pick them up. If you haven't tried Sanderson, I maybe wouldn't start with the Stormlight Archive just because it's a lot to take on. But if you're intimidated by epic fantasy, Sanderson's a great starting point in general because his writing is very accessible. It's easy to read. It's not overly complicated writing. It's not pretentious. It's not, really flowery. It's just very straightforward, very easy to take in and digest. And I've just loved getting to know the characters in the Stormlight Archive and kind of progressing along their storylines with them. All right, we're moving into the top 2. Both of these books, they're somewhat interchangeable. I do have one placed in first, and that's where it belongs, I think. But they're both really fantastic books. I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of good books. But there's very few books that leave me with, the warm fuzzies. Which is a feeling I love. And I don't find too much anymore. Generally, if I want that, I have to go to a reread. Something that's already familiar to me, something that I already know is cozy, and that just makes me happy. And whereas I love reading Sanderson, I love reading lots of other things, they don't necessarily always leave me with that kind of warm, fuzzy, cozy feeling. And when I find a new book that does that, it is just immediately locked into my life as a new favorite that I'm going to return to again and again and again. But like I said, finding new books that do that is pretty rare, and I found 2 of them this year, and that's why they're in the top 2 spots. So let's start with number 2, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is a very hyped book. In fact, a lot of the books on my list are pretty hyped, which is odd for me. But I was just intrigued. I normally wouldn't pick this up, but the cover was beautiful. Just something about it just kind of screamed whimsical at me, and I wanted to read it. And whimsical is exactly the word for it. This is what you get when you write a middle grade story, but you write it for adults. Meaning everything that's good in middle grade, but turned into a story for adults. And I just love this. We follow Linus, who is a social worker. He works for the department in charge of magical youth, I think is what it's called. So he's like a caseworker. He works with different kids. So this is, I guess, would be called a contemporary fantasy. So he goes around and, checks in on these kids that are living in different homes and make sure they're okay, what a caseworker does now. But he's been doing this job for years. He's very responsible, very predictable. Nothing about him is surprising. He's just straightforward, simple. He's a good worker. And so he is chosen to go out to do a kind of a review on this house where they keep 5 of the most dangerous, magical youth. This house isn't even known. He didn't know it existed. It's kind of kept a secret. It's on this island. And so he is tasked to go out there, spend a few weeks there, and just check on everything. Make sure the kids are okay. Make sure Arthur, the man that's kind of in charge of them, is, doing his job well. And so this is the story of Linus's time spent out on this island at the house in the Cerulean Sea. And this book is so lovely. The kids are they're all such unique but lovable and funny characters. It's just a lovely, warm, cozy book. And even if you don't read fantasy, I would recommend this one. It's just good. It's just good. And I know sometimes people like me avoid books because of the hype, and so I'm guessing there's some people out there that are avoiding this book because of the hype. I would say don't. Just go pick it up. It's a very quick read. It's not like diving into epic fantasy that's going to take you a while. It's a quick read. It's just happy. And I would suggest reading it soon. All right, and in the number 1 spot for the year of 2020, my favorite book that I read in 2020, we are going with Sweep by Jonathan Auxier. This is a middle grade Sweep, the story of a girl and her monster. Most of you have read this. I know I'm like the last one to read it. Again, it was very hyped, and so I kind of avoided it for a while, but finally picked it up. I'm so glad I did. And this just goes to show that occasionally I should pick up hyped books, because occasionally the hype is well deserved. But in this book, in case you don't know, we follow Nan Sparrow, who is a chimney boy in London, chimney girl, I guess, in London. So she is one of the very small children that are tasked with climbing up into the chimneys to clean them. So as you can imagine, life's not great for them. They're kept undernourished because they have to stay small. They're not really taken care of very well, and they have to work very hard in very unpleasant circumstances. And one day she gets stuck in a chimney, and basically out of that situation is born her monster. The story of a girl and her monster. Her monster is a creature that is made of ash and coal and becomes her companion. And yeah, their story kind of takes off from there. And it just deals a lot with the history of London and chimney sweeps at the time. So there's a lot of history in there, as well as the fantastical elements. And it's just, everything about this book is perfect. It's just perfect. It's heartwarming and yet bittersweet, and will tear you up a little bit, but make you laugh as well. This is a story you don't want to end. You want it to keep going. You want to continue to be part of this world and to know more about Nan and her friends, her circle of companions. And yeah, if you've avoided this one, please don't. Please go pick it up. It's so good. You won't regret it. So that's it, my top 5 reads of 2020. I would love to know what your top reads were, or if you've read any of these or have been avoiding these, maybe you should let me know, and then I can, push you a little bit to go pick them up. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope your new year has started off well. Hopefully you've already read one of your favorite reads of 2021. I haven't. I've already DNF'd one, so, not a great start, but that's okay. Can only get better from there, right? So again, that's it. Thank you for watching.